What's up everyone, my name is RoyaleRebelle, and in this video I'm going over the newest Dead by Daylight chapter, End Transmission. With this chapter we are getting a new killer, the Singularity, a new survivor, Gabriel Soma, and a new map, Toba Landing. Right now everything is currently in the PTB, and while we can expect some changes before launch, I'm going over the chapter as is. Starting off with Toba Landing, it is probably the most unique map we've gotten to Dead by Daylight so far. Instead of like dark muted colors, it's very vibrant and colorful. The map has a main building in the center with 3 floors, and the entire map is covered in an alien flora. My first reaction to this map was excitement because it's so vastly different compared to the other maps in Dead by Daylight, but this map just lacks something in execution. For both survivor and killer, this map is very difficult to navigate. The flora is just a lot. When in chase, it's very easy for killers to lose scratch marks in the clutter, and for survivors finding generators, it's also very difficult because of that clutter. As we're figuring out like the tiles for looping, while it's a very pretty map to look at, it doesn't feel super friendly for gameplay. It just feels like it needs a little bit of scaling back to become more playable. And moving on to the Singularity. This is the newest killer to come to Dead by Daylight, and I think this is a really interesting killer. But within the first couple days of the PTB being open, there's already some mixed feelings about this killer and its abilities. The killer's power revolves around quantum instination. I hope I said that right. The Singularity can place 8 biopods, and while looking to the biopod, the Singularity can tag survivors within 20 meters, which is how its special ability Slipstream teleportation works. When survivors are afflicted with the temporal slipstream, this allows the Singularity to teleport to a biopod nearby and puts it into overclock mode. While in overclock mode, the Singularity cannot be stunned by pallets. Attempting to stun the Singularity momentarily slows it down and removes the overclock mode. While in overclock mode, the Singularity gains a 75% increase in speed to breaking walls and pallets as well as vaulting. This teleport ability I think is where the mixed feelings come in. For lower skilled killers, it's always tricky getting used to teleporting around the map. There's a level of strategy you have to think about when placing the biopods so that you get the most value from them, and this is something that can be really fun to learn. But if you're a more experienced killer and one who's probably already got that intuition and that strategy on how to best place areas to teleport around the map, it can make chases really short and ultimately less fun. And I will say that this opinion probably isn't helped by the fact that the PTB is such a limited pool that higher skilled players are likely getting paired with more lower skilled survivors than usual, which also contributes to chases feeling less fun. And this is really a big reason why I think anything in the PTB should be taken with a grain of salt, because everybody's going in and trying to do the most busted thing possible. It's not reflective of what actual gameplay is going to look like. To kind of add to that as well, like another thing that higher skilled killers are going to be looking at and making use of much more so than lower skilled killers are the Singularity's add-ons, and it's got some that can definitely make the match more difficult for survivors, such as an add-on that gives the broken status effect after being hit from the slipstream teleport, which this lasts significantly longer than the base kit BT. It has an add-on that gives the Singularity haste after teleporting, and it even can get killer instinct around the biopods. In the right hand, these really do amp up the Singularity's ability to teleport and get it down quickly. The slowdown to this, however, is the EMPs that are generated in printers around the map. And with this chapter, they've updated how killer-specific items work in game. You no longer have to swap items to use them, and they take up a separate slot in the survivor's inventory. However, survivors cannot use the items they brought in with them while holding those items. And the EMP actually has a decent radius to disable biopods and temporal slipstreams. One EMP can deactivate multiple biopods and slipstreams. They just have to be within the visible radius that the EMP generates before activating it. But onto the Singularity's perks. Now overall, I think the perks for both Survivor and Killer for this chapter have a lot of potential. It's just maybe that their stats need some slight tweaking before they come to game, because I really like the idea behind them in practice. It feels like stuff from the PTB never pops off like I think it's going to. The Singularity's 3 perks are Genetic Limits, Force Hesitation, and Machine Learning. Starting off with Genetic Limits, whenever a survivor finishes a healing action, they become exhausted for up to 32 seconds. The only thing I don't like about this perk is that there's really not a limitation to it. Like, there's no cooldown, it's not limited to any sort of radius, and for something that's over 30 seconds, that's a decent amount of time. I just wish they would add some kind of limitation to it, because like if you get a good killer with this perk, you're going to be spending the entire match exhausted or leaving your teammates to be injured so you can use your exhaustion perks. Like, imagine this on a Legion. You're never going to get any value out of your exhaustion perk with this on a Legion. Next is Force Hesitation. Whenever a survivor is put into the dying state, all survivors within a 16-meter radius suffer from the hinder status for 10 seconds. This perk has a 40-second cooldown. I'm surprised I haven't seen this perk run more in the PTB, but compared to the other two singularity perks, I get it. The other ones definitely have the ability to get more value out of them, but overall, I do think this is a fairly balanced perk. I think it'll play well against altruistic teams, but I think it could work well with a little bit of an increase to its radius. Nothing too crazy, maybe 24 meters instead of 16, but I do think that making the radius slightly bigger would make this perk more enticing to use. And finally, we have machine learning. When kicking a generator, machine learning activates. When the compromised generator is completed, you gain undetectable and +7 haste for up to 30 seconds. Only one generator can be compromised at a time, and the compromised generator is highlighted in yellow. This is probably the best perk that comes with the singularity, because it's almost like the opposite of Tinkerer, but then you also get haste. If any of these perks are going to make it into the meta, I fully believe it will be machine learning. Haste with undetectable is so valuable. I can only imagine how this would pair with other perks that give you haste, such as NOED. That sounds terrifying to me. In terms of the singularities Mori, it's okay. It kind of just feels like a different version of Light's Mori, and it's just more concentrated on the face. But I can't pretend that I'm the most creative person when it comes to how to design a Mori, so I'm not going to say too much on that. So on to Gabriel Soma's perks. Gabriel Soma is the new survivor with End Transmission chapter, and his perks are Troubleshooter, Made for This, and Scavenger. And it's taken less than a day for players to already start calling his perks OP, and I kind of just have to laugh at that. So starting off with Troubleshooter, while in chase, you can see the aura of the generator with the most progress, and after dropping a pallet, you can see the killer's aura for up to 6 seconds. The effects of Troubleshooter last up to 10 seconds outside of chase. I think this is a fantastic perk for solo queue. It gives so much information about where to lead chase so you don't accidentally sabotage the generator that's closest to being finished, which can allow your teammates to get it done. It also has value in learning how to mind game at pallets by seeing which direction the killer is going, which is so helpful at jungle gyms when they're blocked by a wall. I'm really excited for this perk because I love information perks. But on to the quote-unquote broken perks. Made for This activates when injured. Survivors get a 3% haste effect, and when completing a healing action, they gain endurance for up to 10 seconds afterwards. This perk cannot be used when exhausted, and so there's a couple things about this perk. First off, players are already overestimating what 3% haste looks like. For comparison, Hope at base is 5%, so this perk doesn't even come up to what Hope starts at. And honestly, 3% is barely noticeable if you can notice it at all. I've said this on Twitter, every single killer perk that gives some sort of haste effect, they start higher than 3%, and that's not even getting into Bloodlust. So to call this perk broken is honestly laughable in my opinion. Not to mention, there are plenty of counters in the game because it cannot be used when exhausted, such as Fearmonger, which is a really common perk. And with genetic limits in the game, once you heal somebody, you have to not run in order to be able to use it again or get that 3% haste. But my favorite thing about this perk is that it actually rewards altruistic healing. If you saw my previous video on the issues I have on the last mid-chapter update, my biggest beef was that the game does not encourage altruistic healing, and this perk is a great step towards rectifying that. And finally, we have Scavenger. When holding a depleted toolbox, Scavenger activates. When you hit a great skill check, you gain a token. 6 tokens, and this perk fully recharges the toolbox, then deactivates for the rest of the trial. Scavenger also grants the ability to rummage a chest for a basic toolbox, aka a yellow toolbox. This is basically like the toolbox version of Hattie's perk, Residual Manifest. Again, I can see why people think this perk is broken, but I'm gonna have to disagree. Don't get me wrong, I understand gen rushing can be a problem in Dead by Daylight, but the whole point of new perks is that they should break up the meta. Currently, we are in a gen regression meta, and that has also eliminated self-healing for survivors. Survivors need a reasonable chance to work through that. Because you're using this perk, this means a couple things. First off, you're not using a medkit, so you're not gonna be able to self-heal. You're not using a flashlight, so you're not going for saves or blinding the killer during chases to prolong the chase. Because you need skill checks to recharge your toolbox, you're probably not wasting charges saboing hooks. The most likely scenario with this perk is that it gets one generator done. And this assumes a lot of things. This assumes the killer is able to avoid the killer, that the killer is not running something like Franklin's, which is a fairly common perk. This assumes, Thatanophobia is not active. This assumes a lot of things. But this perk was made for the current meta, which is almost completely focused on slowing down generator pairs. This is the kind of perk we need to get survivors to be doing something different. And this perk does open up combinations with less used perks, such as Built to Last, which I'm gonna be honest, this is only worth it for the first charge. And even then, It's still a time waster to get value. You have to sit in a locker, which, you know, if you play solo queue, going into a locker is a cardinal sin. You could also pair it with stakeouts to get those great skill checks. But again, this is another time waster because you need to be near the killer to get those tokens for the perk, and you also have the potential to waste those tokens while you still have a full toolbox, because there's a 40% increase in skill checks when using a toolbox. My hope is coming out of the PTB, we don't see the pattern that's been consistently happening for the last few chapters. And that is survivors getting decent perks and then getting nerfed to hell because people who have used them for less than a day or played them against them for less than a day are crying on social media that they're too powerful, when we don't even know if they're gonna make it into the meta. And looking at the survivor perk track record for breaking the meta, that seems really unlikely. Like, it's so telling that the only way behavior could get dead hard out of the meta is by nerfing it 3 times in a row. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm not even fully sure it's actually out of the meta at this point, because that's the state of survivor perks. But like I said earlier in this video, I really do think the perks for both survivor and killer are really promising. I truly believe that they only need some minor adjustments before coming into the game, because these perks have such potential to finally shake up the meta and in a fun way. But these are my thoughts on the new chapter. What do you guys think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel so I can bring you more Dead by Daylight content. And if you want to go check out my Twitch streams, don't forget to follow me there so you'll be notified of when I go live.